Let's talk about the smut I read this summer. I actually took part in Smutathon, whatever that was, and I never got to review all the books, so I'm going to do that now, along with the rest of smut books I read this summer. The first book I read was Rules of Engagement by Lily White. I'm going to be honest, I don't remember a lot about this book. I remember hating it. I know it's about a girl who gets hired somewhere, and there's this guy who's her boss, and he's kind of a douche. I believe this is the one where the boss has like selective mutism, I think. I believe that the main character also was kind of getting stalked by someone or something. Mostly I just remember the book being boring. I remember it not going anywhere, and there's just like some tension between her and her boss every day at work, and it's just her going to work and having that tension but nothing really happening. Neither of the characters were likable. She was giving a decent enough backstory to explain all of her dumb decisions, but not really. He is an interesting character, but not appealing, so like I don't ever really see what she could possibly see in him. She's very shallow. She really appreciates that he's attractive, but not a whole lot else. I really didn't like that she calls another girl a slut for sleeping with her boss when she's doing the exact same thing. There was no sex in the book, which I never appreciate. Overall, the book was just one note, and I wrote down that it kind of seemed like two half-assed books. I don't know what that means anymore because I truly don't remember this book. I gave it a 2, but from what I remember about the book, and the one thing that keeps popping in my head is boring and monotonous, I would put that down to a 1. I feel like I need to start giving ones. Normally I don't. I just always seem to pretend 2 is the lowest it can go, and I won't give 1s unless it really truly is god-awful. But yeah, I need to start using the 1 on that scale. The next thing I read was a short novella called Sweet About You by Laura Greenwood. Going into this, I don't think I realized it was a novella, so that always is a disappointment, and I'm just not really big on novellas, especially when it comes to romance, because I have a problem when romance seems too forced too quickly. So in a novella, that's almost bound to happen, especially in a novella like this, where she's supposed to be in love with multiple men. So it's about this girl who's a baker, and she has some men who fall in love with her. That's basically it. And they start to have sex. It was all very simplistic. It was all very fast. I said it was very twee. There's no depth there. It's just cutesy. There were no distinctions between the men. They all just kind of blended together. And then the book ended before anything got good. She kind of had talked to them about being in a polyamorous relationship and maybe exploring each other too, and I was like, awesome, let's do this. And then the book just ended. So I gave it a 1.5 because I was mad. The next story I read was Hate to Want You by Alisha. I listened to this on audiobook on Crave, which was definitely the wrong choice because, as I said, I've recently discovered that audiobooks just don't work for me. They're great for nonfiction, but any other story, and I'm bound to kind of not like it as much or not to connect with it as much. This book is about 2 people from the same town who hook up one night a year, every year. They are supposed to be bitter enemies, but they've always had an attraction to each other, so that one year they kind of get it out of their systems and then they can move on with their lives for the rest of the year. Eventually, one year she blows him off and they kind of don't talk after that until suddenly she comes back into town. I really liked how fleshed out the backstory was, and I also really liked how fleshed out the side characters were. It just felt like this was a real world where all these people have these real, intimate, complex, complicated relationships. And I really appreciated that. It actually made sense why these people were supposed to be enemies. So often in like enemies to lover things, the enemies part is all about a miscommunication, and there's always a bit of that in each of them, but I truly felt like, okay, this one, yeah, I get it. I get that why there's like a family history there. I thought the sex scenes were really good. There's a blackmail story that I thought was kind of convoluted and kind of annoying. I always find them annoying, almost always, because I'm like, just say something to someone and stop being blackmailed. I liked the depression representation, and I would probably be interested in reading more from this series, but I would definitely buy them as ebooks and not listen to them on audiobook. I gave this book a 3.5 stars, but like I said, because I listened to it on audiobook, kind of take that into consideration and take my review with a grain of salt because it was probably better than that. I read Knotted by Pam Godwin. This book was a cowboy romance. It's about 2 people. I don't remember anyone's names from any books. That's pretty much a given. This girl and this guy, and they were high school sweethearts until a horrible, horrible night happens where she is gang raped, and she decides to leave town after that. Well, she doesn't decide to leave town. She is forced to leave town after that, and all this shit goes down. Her brother kills someone accidentally, and he goes to jail. It's a lot. Eventually she comes back in town, and they kind of reconnect forcefully. This book irritated the absolute shit out of me. It definitely wasn't where I was expecting the story to go. I had no forewarning that there was a rape scene in this. I'm not, like, that's not a trigger for me in any way, but I do think that that's a kind of important thing to know about the story, because it is a very big deal in the story. It is not something non-important. Her entire storyline is about this. It definitely feels like tragedy porn. I will say that this is a constant in Pam Godwin's work. I have read 3 books by her that all of them I'll be reviewing in this video. And she has a thing for rape scenes. Once again, that's fine, but like I think that's something you need to know going into this, because otherwise it is surprising. I didn't like that we spent so much time from his perspective, especially on things like the rape scene. Like, why do I care about his perspective when this is happening to her? So that really irritated me. There's a really convoluted hitman blackmail plotline that, once again, I hate that sort of shit. It is so unnecessary. Just open your mouth and speak to the person. It felt like they took a lot of easy way outs, because there are so many reasons. I mean, she went through so much. He went through so much. Like, this was such a big ordeal, like I said, that there were a million reasons why she could have left town, or why they would have been driven apart after this night, and yet they took the easy way out of doing some really ridiculous storyline with conspiracy and hitmen and all this other shit that, I don't know, I just would have rather seen the emotional take on this, not the really dumb action take on it. And then once he got back, and then in the present, when they finally kind of reconnect, I just could not stand him. I hated him so much. He decided that after some internet research that he knew how to, like, cure her of everything that happened, and that he was going to help her with her trauma. And I just wanted to kill him. He just continues to bring up her triggers and re-traumatize her over and over again until, like, she gets over it. I was just so mad. It was just, I hated him. I hated him so much. Literally everything's on his terms. He's anti-medication. It was just such a bad fucking message to send out there to anyone who's been through something like this. Unbelievable. I gave this book 2 stars, but it probably deserves 1. But the writing was fine. And I've read other of her books, and I do enjoy her writing. The story was just terrible. So yeah, I would suggest not reading this. The next thing I read was Debt Inheritance by Pepper Winters. I've never read Pepper Winters before, but boy am I glad I picked this book up. I really enjoyed it. I'm someone who likes a lot darker smut than most people, and a lot of times I just find, like, I can't really get what I'm looking for, because of course a lot of authors don't want to cross the lines and offend people, and I understand that. I think my whole thing with these types of books is you can go as dark as you want, just don't romanticize it. You can eroticize it, of course, because it's an erotica, that's what we're here for, but once you romanticize it and seem like, oh, he's doing all these terrible things to me, but, like, it's because he loves me, like, that's when I get annoyed. This honestly was, like, everything I wanted in dark romance. Basically, it's about this girl who somehow gets inherited by this guy. He owns her now. And none of that makes sense. I have absolutely no idea how that works, but I don't care. Like, I feel like a lot of books like this, and I've read a lot like this, tend to try to over-explain the situation, or, you know, how this could happen, but obviously it doesn't make sense. This is never gonna make sense. No one's ever gonna believe it, so just don't even bother. Just have it happen, and I'll go with it. I liked that these were bad guys who are actually bad. Like I said, he's not like Christian Grey or anything. Not that Christian Grey was a good person, but they tried to like romanticize him and make him a good person, you know? So they didn't do that here. Now, I will say this is the first in a series of like 7, so it might go there and turn him into like a hero of some stupid sort, but for now, I like it a lot. I will say that the main character wasn't very developed, and her inner dialogue kind of went around in circles a lot, and that got kind of annoying, where she was up and down all over the place being like, oh, but maybe he actually cares about me, and she'd get her hope up and then just to get it squashed back down. I'm like, could you just chill? So that was irritating, but any scene that they had met my expectations for what I want in these types of eroticas, so I'm very excited to read the next couple. And I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars, but I'd probably bump that up to a 4.5. I really enjoyed it, and I think the next one will be even better. Alright, now it's time to talk about another Pam Godwin book. So this one is called Dark Notes. I actually liked this one, but it's messed up, and I think it's okay because I know how I felt about the situation, but I don't know how, if I'm reading it, it's how it was supposed to be presented. This was about a girl who is kind of a musical prodigy, and she ends up getting enrolled in this prestigious school for musicians. And anyway, she starts working with this teacher, and they start an affair of sorts. Now, the thing is, this had a ton of tragedy porn as well. Like I said, this is just Pam Godwin's thing. She is kind of the poor student in a very rich school, and she has been raped and molested by her brother's best friend for much of her life, and then she's also getting taken advantage of by guys at school. So, yeah. And then along comes her teacher, and I'm not against student-teacher relationships in books, in erotica books specifically. I'm against them in real life, I'm against them in other books. But in this situation, it was kind of uncomfortable. Like I said, it worked for me, but it felt like you could see him grooming her. And I liked that. Like, I liked that it felt like a realistic portrayal of an older man and how he grooms a younger girl into getting with him. But I don't think that's necessarily what the book was trying to do. I don't think that was like Pam Godwin's goal. I think she was trying to be romantic, and this was supposed to be like cute, but it definitely didn't feel like it. It definitely felt like the old man who believes that the young girl is just so mature beyond her years. I felt like the male teacher character, he was kind of terrible, but like he was a very well-defined character. He was a very interesting character, and I think he was a great kind of conflicted character where like he is a bad dude, but you can also see why she would go to him, which I feel like is sometimes rare, because sometimes the dudes are so awful that you're just like, why would she ever be interested in this guy? But like I do feel like you see it, you understand it in this book. I felt like the author really understood both the characters very deeply. They were well-defined characters, and I did enjoy the book overall. The sex scenes were kind of fun. Yeah, overall, I enjoyed the book, but it's definitely not for everyone. I actually gave it 4.5 stars. Yeah, I really did enjoy the dynamic of the student-teacher relationship, even if I thought it was super messed up. I thought it was a good representation of what this type of relationship would actually look like, as messed up as it is. Now on to the other Pam Godwin book I read this month, which was Blood of Eve. A while back I reviewed the first book in this series. This is the second book, and I said that it was super racist and that you probably shouldn't read it. Unfortunately, I bought these two books together. The second book, the reason I bought it with the first book is because in the first book, like at the very beginning of the first book, said it was like the dirtiest book she had ever written. So I was like, well, I obviously need that. And I hadn't read the first book yet, so I bought the second one, and then I discovered how racist the first book was. This book is about, there's a virus that sweeps through the world, and it kills off all babies and most women. Well, actually, it turns the women into killers and makes them infect the men. The men then turn into aphids, or aphids, I don't know. They're like big ass bugs. And basically, Eve ends up being the only woman left on Earth. The first book was very racist. All the three love interests she has are very stereotypical cliches of their races, and the villain is an Islamic man who did this all in the name of Allah. So that was pretty terrible. The second book wasn't much better. It was very, very slow at the beginning. Not a lot happened. It was definitely way too long. The sex scenes that I was promised were very good, but I mean, there's 3 men in love with her, and I was expecting a foursome that I never got, so I feel like that was the only reason I was reading. And I never got that, so that was disappointing. I really did like the dynamics between the men and her. I just wish the author was a bit better with the characters. I'm not going to read the last book in this series. I don't feel like I need to. The climax in this book, the final confrontation action scene, was a big letdown. But I will say that the ending was very affecting. It worked really well, but it felt like an ending. I really don't feel like I need the final book, which is great. I can quit with this series and possibly with this author. Who cares what I rated it? Don't read it. The next thing I read was Born Darkly by Trisha Wolfe. This is about a psychiatrist who falls in love with her patient who is a convicted killer. I didn't write a lot about this. I was going through some things at the time, but I did enjoy this book. I found it dark, but I mean, not really as dark as I was expecting. I really liked their dynamic, and I enjoyed that when they fell in love, it didn't suddenly make them better people. They're just dark, crazy-ass people together. I like that. I liked a lot of the scenes, like, once they got out of the patient-criminal dynamic, or patient-psychiatrist dynamic. I'm definitely going to read the second one, and I would suggest you read this if you're interested. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. So, one of the challenges during Smutathon was that you had to read something that's outside your comfort zone. There are not a ton of things that are outside my comfort zone. For the most part, I feel like I can pretty much read whatever. The one thing that is incest, because that just makes me so uncomfortable. And I am nothing if not down for a challenge. So I decided to read Naughty Bits by Selena Kitt. This is a very, like, cult classic somehow, and it's basically just about a brother and sister who have a sexual relationship. There is not much more to it than that. I read this on ebook because I'm obviously not going to pay for it. It was unscripted, actually. There wasn't much of a story. It was kind of just outright porn, which was interesting. I was glad they were both of age. I was very worried that one of them was going to be in their 20s or something, and one of them was going to be, like, in their teens, and that would have been not great. But they are both of age, so that is a good thing. I was really glad while reading this that I didn't have a sibling, because I didn't have to awkwardly think about my own sibling in this position, so that's nice. Thank God for being an only child. I actually want to read more by this author, because while this book made me really uncomfortable, I actually really liked the way all the sex scenes were written. Like I said, it was honestly a lot different than a lot of the erotica I read, because it truly did just feel like porn. Like, I feel like there's a certain sort of erotica that's written for women, and then a certain sort of erotica that's written for men, and this felt like something that was written for men. But I kind of like that. It was so blunt, and I felt, too, like, the sex scenes were very inventive and graphic, and I feel like she was always trying to one-up herself, which I kind of liked. There was a cucumber scene that I kind of loved. I just had to kind of disconnect from the fact that they were brother and sister, although she kept calling him brother over and over again in the sex scene, so it's not like I could easily forget. I gave this a 4. If that's your thing, it's a decently written thing for it. Still not my thing, though, so. The next 2 books are all by the author Sierra Cartwright. The first book I read by her was Double Trouble. This book is about twin brothers who are trying to find the right woman that they can have a relationship with together. I actually really enjoyed this book a lot more than I thought I would. The twin thing kind of threw me off. It's hard for me to picture the same guy just twice but with different personality. I don't know why. I like having different actors in my head. I read a lot of BDSM and S&M books, but I'm way more into S&M than I am BDSM, because I don't really like all the rules and crap that they have with it. I just don't find it that sexy. But in this book, I actually really appreciated it. They found a very fun way to do it, but I also felt like they showed why being colored is so powerful and like so meaningful in this book. I also thought it was a fun examination of a triad. I appreciated that the author used very blunt language in sex scenes, because one of the things that drives me nuts the most is very flowery, stupid language for private parts and shit. There was a lot of sex, and the sex scenes were great, but I appreciated that they showed how respectful the guys were of her and how respectful she was of them, and how they all took their time together despite the like somewhat hardcore sex scenes. The ending was rushed, and I really don't like the just forced happily ever after sort of ending, and this author seems to be a fan of them. I ended up giving this 4 stars. The next book I read by this author was called Shockwave. It was really just about a girl who worked at this kind of sex club, and the boss that came in and was trying to retrain her. I wasn't a huge fan of this. I just didn't really connect with the characters as much. I really appreciated that they talked about the differences between BDSM and S&M. I thought that was really nice, and how you can like one but not the other. But honestly, that was kind of all I got out of it. Another rushed happy ending that I just didn't really care for, and I would give this probably 2.5 stars out of 5. It just wasn't that engaging. And then the last book I read by this author was Crave. This book is about a couple who used to be together, and she decides that she wants him back, and she goes to his best friend's birthday party to try and hook up with him. I really liked the ex dynamic that they had, although I will say the guilt got a little annoying that he kept laying on her for leaving him, and I eventually got kind of sick of that, but I did appreciate like her sassy side, that she didn't always put up with it. They had really good conversations about open communication, and I definitely appreciate that. It felt like the ex dynamic was very real, like these two people did really know each other. But other than the characters, I just wasn't that invested. I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. So that is all the smut I read this summer. What can I say? I like smut. Hope you liked this video, and hopefully you'll come back again soon. Bye.